You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey everybody, today's guest is Bill Stevenson, drummer for the Manhattan Beach, California punk rock band, The Descendents. Together we take a deep dive into the writing, recording, and inspiration behind the fan-favorite song, Clean Sheets, taken from their 1987 album, All. The All record was the first recording to feature both guitarist Stephen Egerton and bassist Carl Alvarez, and their presence is immediately felt and heard. Upon putting Clean Sheets under my microscopic lens, I noticed quite a few guitar overdubs in the verses, choruses, and guitar solo, something Descendents didn't really do on later records. Bill chalked this up to still learning his way around a recording studio, and credits recording engineer Richard Andrews, who recorded both All and its predecessor Enjoy, with offering him and the band endless studio knowledge. In short, they were experimenting and learning as they went. As Bill reflected back on the lyrics of this song, he now realizes that the tone is very judgmental and one-sided, but quickly pointed out that if you're not a little bit embarrassed or put off by your earlier work, then you really haven't grown as a person. Interesting take. Oh, and Bill lets us in on a little secret about who wrote the lyrics on verse 3 of Clean Sheets. For all this and a whole lot more, don't you dare go anywhere.
Hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here watching Bill finish his burrito with a cup of coffee. This is a perfect setup for the start of this episode. And he's holding up what looks like a cookie. Is that a cookie?
No, it's a baby carrot.
Oh, baby carrot.
Yeah, and see, I got nuts too.
Nuts, baby carrots, burritos, and coffee. The diet of Bill Stevenson in 2023.
I was trapped in my studio here with my dogs because my wife had a hair customer. She does people's hair in the house, and sometimes the dogs attack the customers, so she puts them down here with me when she has a hair customer. So I was locked in here and I couldn't get any breakfast, so now I'm having my breakfast.
There we go. Well, perfect. Well, Bill, I'm not sure you even realize the impact of the episode that we did with you. And we had talked about One More Day in Steve's Boy, and it was one of my early episodes on the pod, and it continues to have a life of its own. People still talk about that episode. Just want to thank you again for doing that one, and thank you for coming back for part 2. You're one of our repeat offenders.
I didn't know it was going to be so traumatizing to talk about that stuff. I kind of thought I had moved past it all, you know. It's funny, these shrinks talk about stuff, you know, that's way down in you. And you can think you've totally forgot about something, and then it can just come up out of nowhere, and you're like, what? Where the hell did that come from?
I know, and it's so strange because I teetered. I was going back and forth with it. I had emails and text messages that I was going to forward to you, and I was like, just leave him alone. Let it be. We did the we did the podcast because, Bill, I was getting emails, my producer and I, from people, grown men, saying that they had to pull off the side of the road on the way to work to have a cry, to shed a tear when they were listening to that. So it really resonated with a lot of people.
Well, I hope some people got something out of it. We've all got our sad stories, right? You know.
Absolutely. And having just lost my father a couple months ago, it hits all too well that pain of realizing he's not going to be here anymore. You know, that finality.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. What happened with your father?
Yeah, he had Parkinson's disease. He had it for about 7 years. He battled it 7 or 8 years, which is about the prognosis, the life expectancy, I should say, when you're diagnosed with it, about 7 or 8 years, and about right on time. He passed away.
How old was he when he passed away?
Yeah, he was 74 years old.
What's the medicine called that you take when you have Parkinson's?
Gabapentin. That's one of the ones.
The one they were giving my dad, it had the word dope in it, like not dopamine, but
Yeah, it was levodopa.
right. Okay, right.
Yeah, levodopa.
So he was starting to lose his mind, and I would give him his meds, and he would say, "You got to give me the rope-a-dope." I didn't realize till way later he was talking about, because, Muhammad Ali had Parkinson's.
Yes.
So my dad
Yes.
was keen on the fact that he was taking probably the same medicine that Muhammad Ali took, because my dad loved Muhammad Ali. So he called the
That's
medicine
awesome.
the rope-a-dope.
Yeah, that was the stuff they had him on, and it's funny, as you know, you start down that road, you start on one medication. Well, you got now you have to take something to counter the effects of that one, and near the end, he was taking a whole cabinet full of stuff, so it was absolutely crazy. But yeah, that's life, though, right? And it brings us to, again, you're a repeat offender. You're back for time number 2, and you've been kind enough to discuss Clean Sheets with us, which is from the Descendents' 4th album, All, which was released in June of '87. And I got to ask you, Bill, when was this song written? Do you remember? Because, I mean, you guys back then, your previous record, Enjoy, came out in '86. You had a lineup change with Carl and Stefan joining the band, and you record All. You were touring, studio, it was one or the other, constantly busy. So do you recall when you wrote Clean Sheets? Do you remember?
Yeah, let's see. I guess that was in '86. Yeah, I mean, I wrote that like right when Carl and Stefan joined the band. When I think of that song, now that I'm old and wise, the first thing I think of is the male double standard. I wrote it when I found out, my girlfriend had been cheating on me. But, I mean, I was going out on tour and, doing what we did on tour back then as young lads, And so I really shouldn't have written that song, because it represents a double standard.
That's interesting you say that, because ultimately that's what it was about. But I consider this one of a long line of love songs that you wrote in your career.
Yeah, totally. We can talk about that and stuff, but I'm saying at the core of it, now that I'm, I got 40 years later or whatever, I'm able to go, well, because I'm still friends with the person. We're like good buddies now, friend buddies. And I'm able to go, well, I really shouldn't have thrown her under the bus like that, because she wasn't a villain,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you something else that happened. And I know that there was 2 other ingredients that came in with Carl and Stefan. But, this whole time period, every time that you pressed record, I feel like you were absorbing and you were learning. And there was something about this album in particular, when I look back at the catalog, there was definitely a jump up in the quality of production on this record. It's amazing. It's... with the technology, you weren't recording to Pro Tools. It was all the tape back then. You had a limited budget, but I think this recording sounds great.
I think it sounds pretty good. Along the way, we made an awful lot of engineering mistakes or production mistakes, because we were learning how to do it, and we would overreact a lot and do things that just made things sound silly, and we thought we were making them sound cool. It definitely took a long time to figure out how to do all that stuff correctly, much longer than I had thought it would have. If you go through the Descendents and the All catalog, you can, as an engineer, you can literally hear every kind of engineering mistake that can be made. We made every one of them. But on Descendents All, we had Richard Rodriguez. Back then he went by Richard Andrews. We had him in doing the engineering, and so he was assertive enough to not let us take it into any silly direction. So I think it's pretty cool.
Well, speaking of silly direction, you guys had songs like Silly Girl, for instance. You had songs like Wiener Schnitzel. You had songs like One More Day that were gut-wrenching in another way. You had love songs. I always thought of Clean Sheets as part of the trifecta. The next song that you wrote that was in that same type of vein, to me, was She's My Ex from Alroy's Revenge in '89. And then, of course, Long Distance. And I could even maybe lump Shreen a little bit in there. But
if you want the buddy song of Clean Sheets, It's Spineless and Scarlet Red.
They'll see us crumble as we count the many ways you left us. Spineless and scarlet red. Scarlet.
Yeah, that would be its mature cousin, giving ample fault to both parties, unlike Clean Sheets.
Gotcha. Well, I think that's what it was about Descendents. You guys gave people so much to go on. You had the silly songs, you had the heartbreak, you had the love songs. You were writing about things that, at that time, there was some punk bands that couldn't write a love song. It just wasn't in their arsenal. It wasn't in their wheelhouse to do.
We had teachers, we had the last. Joe Nolte was a Class A balladarian. I mean, he taught us how to write about relationships in a kind of a meaningful way.
Is it right that I should be so in love with what I see when I know it cannot be? When I know it cannot be, still I see.
I mean, he didn't teach us. We just basically ripped off the last. I mean, that was our thing.
Well, and you've always championed that band. You've always talked about the Last as a big influence. And I look at something like Clean Sheets, and I know you know this. I'm just really saying this for everybody listening, but this song was written probably in 86, recorded in 87. It was just so ahead of its time. You heard songs like Clean Sheets starting in the early 90s on just every pop punk record and beyond at that point. It was such a blueprint for things to come. And when you wrote it, I'm sure it was just another song that you wrote that day, right?
When we were younger, I think I can speak for all of us. We had the benefit of not being so self-aware. And we had no real idea what we were doing. We just were writing about what was on our mind that day. Maybe Carl. I mean, Carl was kind of always more intelligent than the rest of us. I might be pissing people off, but I mean, Carl's like the smartest guy in the whole world ever. And
yes,
maybe he was more self-aware just because I think part of being wise is being self-aware. But no, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I could just write about a fart or whatever. Not to say that a fart is equivalent to a girlfriend, but farts are like guitar solos. They're only cool if you're the one doing it,
Very, very, very true.
That's actually a Carl line. He came up with that.
Well, I was down recently the YouTube rabbit hole, and there was a video from the Black Flag days. And it was funny because my immediate thought was like, someone must have had that huge camcorder on their shoulder as they're filming you and Henry. And you're sitting there talking to some kid. It was an interview. And you had this, even when I first met you, I've talked about this before. My listeners have heard me say this, but you had this exterior. You're this tough guy and you wouldn't really look people in the face. But yet there's this side of you that could write these songs like Clean Sheets and Long Distance and She's My Ex. It was just, it didn't seem like it was the same person that could do that.
Yeah, that's I call it that my body type doesn't match my personality. I'll never forget this. This is classic. So Bug. Of course. We all know Bug, and Bug passed away last year, and one of our just dear friends. But he was our main roadie for the whole time in the band, right? And so we were playing a show. It was with you guys. It was when All was playing with we did all those long tours together with the Hot Waters and Discount and all that stuff. And I just finished playing and I'm soaking wet, and I got like the drumstick sawdust stuck in my chest hairs, and I'm sitting there picking those out so I can put my clothes back on. And Bug comes back with this young lady who said, I guess she wanted to meet the person that wrote Silly Girl, So he says, well, that's him there in the corner. So she comes over and she goes, you wrote Silly Girl? And I go, yeah. And she goes, ew. And she ran out of the room. Awesome. Awesome, right? She actually said ew. She didn't say gross, but she was thinking gross.
Because you weren't a kid. You were a kid when you wrote that song. By the time she talked to you, you were probably in your early to mid-30s.
Yeah, funny.
Which is all perspective, as we know. We look back now and go, geez, I wasn't old then, but people thought I was. But, this song, I want to say, Bill, it was maybe the first Descendents song I ever heard. And I think that's part of the reason why I love it so much, probably in my top 5 Descendants songs. And I want to jump into this bad boy. It's 3 minutes and 9 seconds. The intro is 14 bars total. The first 7 bars, stereo guitars, are in with bass playing these high octave, like call and response plucks. And you're riding the hi-hat, Bill. You're playing on the hi-hat in this intro. It's very jazzy and way more sophisticated than most punk bands in 1987 were doing. On bar 8, a tom buildup takes the whole band in for the next 6 bars before we get into verse 1. And when we get into this part, I call it that surf snare. Pop, 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 pop. That classic Descendents beat happens here before we get into verse 1. It's awesome. Do you recall writing this intro? Was this intro just always like this, or did you have like the chorus and the bulk of the song, and then you, Stefan, and Carl kind of worked this intro up, or did you write the intro from the get-go?
Clean Sheets is one of the ones where it really kind of came to me all at once in a big flurry, and I woke up and it was kind of all there. Although, funny, I didn't have a last verse. And the very, very last verse, those are Bugs lyrics.
No kidding.
Like, I woke up this morning alone on the floor, thinking about a clean sheets the way it was before. Looked in the mirror, saw your face, and thought of the past, took my fist and smashed the glass. That Bug wrote that whole verse.
No kidding.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
That's awesome. I did not know that.
But yeah, like the guitar riffs, those all came with the dream. When I get those dreams, I don't get them that often. But when I do, then it's a whole finished thing,
You talked to me about that the last time we did this. You said you've had full compositions. You woke up and they were there.
Yeah.
I've never done that. I've dreamt that I was writing, or we've all had those dreams. We're trying to get to the stage and someone's chasing us and there's a 50-pound, weight attached to our leg, and those nightmare type dreams. But I've never had a finished song wake up and it be there. That's unbelievable.
I've never had the 50-pound weight one. Well, it's funny though. I'm not really able to do the whole like pick a guitar up and strum some chords and then like sing a melody over it. Kind of like, what if I go to A flat? Oh, well, how about C sharp minor? I can't really do that. I mean, I wish I could, because I could be more prolific, but I don't have to just kind of hang out and wait for these like things to come to me. Because then it's like, I didn't write it. It just showed up, it just showed up one day and there it was. Sometimes I have to work on it to figure out what it is, like the fingering on the guitar or the fingering on the bass, but it's all in my head, yeah.
Right, and has that ever been frustrating with certain guitar players? I know by now you can just look at Stefan and he'll understand musically where you're kind of going with a track, but back then, was it ever difficult for you to get what was brewing in your head out if you couldn't figure out what you were going for on guitar? Because I've done that. I've had something in my head.
I always figure it out, because I mean, when I was in my formative period here, I played a lot of guitar. I mean, I would play hours and hours of guitar and a lot of bass too. My first song was My Age. I wrote it on the bass. And second song was Bikeage, and I wrote that on the bass too. The melody part.
Sure.
I've always approached it from every angle: guitar, bass, vocals, drums. And that kind of also makes me not be a good, I'm not a good like drummer. The guys that have like their sticks in their socks and they have a drum key necklace? and a Zildjian shirt. Like, I mean, I'm
Of
cool
course.
with that. But they're like drummers, you know, they're into drumming. They're into the paradiddles. They're into the flamadapoo or whatever it is. I'm not that kind of drummer. But I make up for it by knowing my way around kind of any instrument you hand me. If you give me an hour to fiddle with it, I'll play you something.
Well, I've talked about that in the show. You know, the drummers that I've met and that I've worked with that don't play guitar and don't play another instrument, it's sometimes very difficult to get them to hear where you want an accent or where you want a part. And I think that that's so important. I've always encouraged younger drummers. I'll say to them, do you play any other instruments? Well, no. Why? I'm like, you should pick up a guitar. It'll help you later on.
It's crazy how many people are tone deaf too. I mean, I'm not putting them down, but it's crazy. So at the studio, at the blasting room, we have our internship thing where, you know, every 6 months we take on a couple new interns for 6 months or for more if they prove to be promising. You know, we probably end up hiring them. You know, so that my first thing when I'm interviewing the intern is first thing I go sing "Row Row Row Your Boat," and then I go okay sing "Happy Birthday." And if they can't sing "Row Row Row Your Boat" and "Happy Birthday," I don't mean to sing it well, but I mean to acknowledge that there are notes and melody and rhythm and phrasing. Then yes. I tell them they should try to have a career that's not in music, you know, because I feel like I'm doing them a favor by telling them that. But then maybe it could be like, well, no, I can still be a drummer, can I?
Well, yeah, and drummers are unfairly put down for that sometimes too. All you could do is hit things. You're not musical, and that's not true either. But verse 1, Bill. Clean sheets mean a lot to a guy who sleeps on the floor. I wanted your love and a shelf on your dresser drawer. You tucked me in, stopped my tossing and turning, but I turned back the covers and saw those sheets are dirty. Now, those lyrics came in a dream as well?
Yeah, ish. You know, half of them are kind of not the words themselves, but the feeling of the verse, like the feeling of it, sort of. I can't. So I can't explain it. I can't explain how that works. But I was kind of feeling maybe like, you know, feeling really loved and cared for, and kind of, you know, driving up and spending the night with this person. And, you know, I thought, well, I'm cool. This is cool for me. Like I sleep on the floor in the practice room, but I can go up there and I can get a shower, and, you know, maybe I could start keeping a couple of my things in her room, you know, just so I wouldn't have to haul them back and forth or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then, you know, so it's kind of like, you know, just juxtaposing the kind of safety and comfort of that with the stark reality that, like, well, guess what? Everybody's human and they do good things and bad things. You know, nobody's one thing. Everybody's both things. Everybody's good. Everybody's bad.
Complex creatures. Well, the stereo guitars, bass, and the drums are all in here on verse 1, but there's some things here, Bill, that I noticed that I've heard this song I don't know how many times over the years, but I'm listening to this, I'm really taking a deep dive, and on the second line, right around, I wanted your love and a shelf on your dresser drawer, that line, there's this guitar, jing, jing, overdub that happens. On the third line, the overdub is like this higher 4-note lick that comes in, and on the fourth line, that jing jing from the second line, those guitar overdubs like chords are coming in.
I wanted your love and a shelf on your dresser drawer. You tucked me in, stopped my tossing and turning, but I turned back the covers and I saw those sheets all dirty.
Do you recall doing that? And what was the thought process there? It's great, but I just never really noticed it.
Yeah, those were some of the first times we ever overdubbed. There's some overdubs on the Enjoy album, and there's some overdubs on the Descendents All album. I never really, at that point, I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to kind of the layering by which the guitars were being done. it was kind of like, I think Stefan recorded a basic rhythm guitar on that was pretty basic, live with the drums. Because we did the drums, basic guitar live. And then, so these were maybe afterthoughts of things that we thought maybe should go, kind of little added accent points that nowadays we do not overdub nowadays. It's just...
I remember when you guys did, I want to say it was either Mass Nerder or Problematic, where Stefan was like, no, I'm not punching in.
Yeah, we don't even punch in. It's pretty funny. We just go for, okay, whatever, however we're going to play the song live, that's how it's going on the record. I don't know if it's a good ethos or a bad ethos, but that's kind of what we've resolved to, which is so funny because me being a studio owner and whatever, producing all these records and stuff, but with Descendents, I like it really, that's not pure, but I like it to just sound like if people come see us, they go, yeah, oh yeah, they're playing it how I learned it on the record. They can actually play that song instead of, you go see bands live sometimes and their records are such that, that when you do go see them, it seems really, it's a letdown.
Sure.
I don't want to be a letdown. I don't want the records to like mislead anyone, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It was really funny when I never got this from this song, but this first verse with those guitar overdubs, it just, I don't know why. Maybe it's because it was around the same time period, the 80s, but reminded me of like how Billy Idol would layer his guitars on Rebel Yell with Steve Stevens. They would have these just, these stereos that were kind of sitting back, they were there. They weren't super dominant, but they'd have these middle of the verse guitar overdub parts come in. I think that's great.
Me in particular, I was listening to a lot of Generation X, Durwood, that guitar player, and then also into those first couple of Billy Idol solo records. I really liked the way Steve Stevens and Durwood, the way both of them handled their guitar parts. So it's weird. I feel like I was barking up the same tree as they were, but then when I became more aware of them, I then became influenced by them as well. Yeah.
That's awesome and cool that you say that, because again, I've never had a Billy Idol influence jump out to me in a Descendents song until this. I was like, wow, it was reminiscent of those production qualities.
Oh, you Sour Grapes smells of it.
You're just sour grapes. Well, I refuse to climb the ladder for you. Sour grapes, no, I refuse to bend for you. Sour grapes, I need love.
Sour Grapes and Green, those just reek of 80s stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the lyric in chorus 1 is, even though you'll never come clean, it's true. Those sheets are dirty, and so are you.
Yeah, that's Bill's dad talking. My dad taught me to be misogynist, homophobic, racist. He put all this crappy stuff in my head. When my father was first of all, my father's dad used to beat the shit out of him pretty much every day, whether he did anything wrong or not. He would beat all the 4 kids. Okay. So then when my dad got to be a young man and he went to World War II, he was engaged at the time, engaged to be married. And while he was in World War II, freezing his ass off in the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, he got a Dear John letter while he was up there freezing his ass off. And I think he couldn't see that for what it was, that this woman was, didn't want to wait any longer. He saw it as like, well, all women are evil or something. And that's what he tried to teach me. And when I was a young adult, before I realized how full of shit my father was, I used to harbor some of those beliefs inside of me, all the bad shit he taught me.
Yeah.
But I've gotten rid of all of that now. I'm not any of those things he tried to make me be.
Yeah. Well, that's that wisdom that comes with age.
Like, nobody's dirty or clean. We're not all dirty or all clean. We're all both things.
Hey, everybody, don't go anywhere. We got lots more coming up with Bill Stevenson after a few words from our sponsors.
Ready for a head-bangingly good time? Dive into the world of heavy metal with the Brutally Delicious podcast. Here, we don't just talk music. We welcome you into our heavy metal family. Join us for candid chats with legends and rising stars. We go beyond the typical interviews, exploring raw emotions and the life-altering impact of heavy metal. So whether you're a diehard metalhead or just curious, join our family and let the headbanging begin with the Brutally Delicious podcast.
Do you like to laugh, geek out on music, and learn all about that band or artist who had that one song back in the day, but then seemed to fall off the face of the earth? If so, you need to subscribe to One Hit Thunder. Together with an array of interesting and hilarious guests, we do a weekly dive into one-hit wonders like Eiffel 65's Blue, Krayshawn's Gucci Gucci, EMF's Unbelievable, Delamitri's Roll to Me, Los Del Rio's Macarena, Musical Youth's Pass the Dutchie, and even Patrick Swayze's She's Like the Wind. So are you subscribed to One Hit Thunder or what? As Desiree would say, you gotta be. And as K7 would encourage, you gotta come baby come and join in on the fun of the One Hit Thunder podcast.
Come, baby, come, baby, baby, come, come. Come, baby, come, baby, baby, come. Tell you how much I love you.
And now, back to the show.
Well, I noticed some things here in chorus one I want to talk to you about. On the first line, even though you'll never come clean, you know it's true. The lead vocal goes to stereo. Okay, so for everyone listening, it instead of being center, okay, if you close your eyes and you listen to that first line here, the vocals go to each speaker, right and left, and then the rest of it is centered. Do you remember doing that in the mix, and how'd that come about?
It was recorded that way. I want to say there was probably a practical reason for it. Like, because those notes were pretty high. That's got a high A in it.
Yes.
And I think Milo had to use his passing voice for those lines. And so we thought, well, we'll double it since he's using his passing voice. You know, maybe. I don't really know. I don't remember.
It's really, really interesting. On the second line as well, another guitar besides the stereos comes in the center. On Those Sheets Are Dirty and So Are You, another guitar comes in there. Again, kind of odd knowing that you guys don't really do overdubs anymore.
Well, we were doing them then. We were doing them on what, just kind of those two albums only, really. Enjoy and Enjoy and all. There's a few overdubs on Grow Up. There's one, like on Grow Up, there's one overdub that I think's pretty cool, which is that the intro of Silly Girl. Like there's guitars that are playing just the chords, and then there's another guitar playing the little no. You know, because I always feel like that's one case where live it just doesn't sound as good without those big rhythm guitar underlays. So, you know, you win some, you lose some.
For sure. Well, we get our first harmonies in the song here on Know It's True and So Are You. And out of chorus one, we go into verse 2.
The warmth of a bed to a guy who sleeps on the floor was enough to perpetuate all the lies I heard before. And now I want to hold you, gotta hold my pillow instead. 'Cause my pillow will never lie, I'll be with a stranger in my bed.
The warmth of a bed to a guy who sleeps on the floor was enough to perpetuate all the lies I heard before. And now I want to hold you. Gotta hold my pillow instead, 'cause my pillow will never lie or be with a stranger in my bed.
Just sometimes people rationalize a situation and then they ignore the truths. And that's kind of what I was saying in there. But again, it's who am I to judge, right? But that's what I was thinking at the time was I kind of ignored some harsh realities that were staring me in the face, or maybe that friends were telling me, because I was comfortable. I was comfortable. I had a comfortable situation. But then, you know, for the back half of the verse, I figured, well, maybe I'm just better by myself without having to trust anyone. It's just reactionary extremes, you know.
Did you ever hear at this point from any close friends or anybody that didn't have to tell you this, like maybe your old elementary school buddy that all of a sudden heard Descendents, and you came from Black Flag, which their songs were not really, especially at that time, commercially accessible in any way, shape, or form. But do you recall anybody having a conversation with you when they heard Clean Sheets of, wow, this song is really good? And what they meant by that is this song's kind of accessible. This song has a little bit of mainstream quality besides the screaming hardcore.
Yeah, meaning good, not just like good for a punk band good. Yeah. No, I get it.
Right.
I get it. And I mean, I never really, the punk band title or rock band, power pop, with the last, it was power pop because punk rock didn't exist yet when they started. Or, I mean, punk rock as we know it. Because, there was the Kinks. I mean, the Kinks were, and the Seeds, how much more punk rock could you be, right? But
sure.
Okay, look. Like when I was in maybe 9th grade, I don't know which one of my friends, but I was telling them, I just picked up a new Devo record. And they go, well, oh, Devo. Well, I heard of that. They go, what does that sound like? And I just stood there and I go, I don't know. It sounds like Devo. And see, now we can look back and go, oh, well, Devo was a new wave band. But at the time, they were Devo. They were Devo.
Yeah.
Nobody, they weren't part of a scene or anything. I never aligned myself with any particular scene. I always felt like if you can describe a band by that in those terms, they're probably not a very interesting band. Like, what about when Sabbath came out? Well, what do they sound like? Well, see, here's the thing. They sound like Black Sabbath,
Yeah. Well, who was down tuning, Drop D back in 1969, 70?
Well, but they weren't at first. They weren't. They didn't really get into that till their third album. No, they were just heavy because they were heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very true. Well, verse 2, the stereo guitars are in with the bass and drums. The hi-hat here, Bill, it seems a bit more open on verse 2. The stereo guitars seem a bit more aggressive upon really getting it under the microscope, and the bass guitar is just moving all over the place here. I did notice that those jing-jings on those guitars and that little noodle on line 3 and the jing-jing on line 4 here, they're here again in verse 2 like verse 1. They don't seem as loud, and I would have to think that you didn't mix them any lower than the first verse. I'm thinking that the other things I said here, the more intense, the intensity of the hi-hat and the guitars, maybe that was a little bit louder and made the other stuff, the overdub, seem lower in volume or intensity.
Wow, I probably should have done like a headphone study of that mix before we talked, because you know way more about this recording than I do, which is funny, I guess, but true. The answer is I have no idea. That's been 30 years and 2 craniotomies ago. I don't know.
Yes, I think you're our only guest, Bill, in 3 years to have had successful brain surgery. So
I had 2 craniotomies, 2 of them.
Yes, 2. Well, I think that's what it was. And to answer your question, yes, I the last 2 days, I'm realizing things about this song that I never heard before, and that was one of them. They definitely overdubs seem lower here. Chorus 2. Chorus 2 is the same lyric as chorus 1. Harmonies are in the same spot. That lead vocal goes to stereo on that first line again. That guitar on the third line, right up the middle. Again, that overdub, it's awesome. Was there ever any thought, Bill, of maybe changing up the lyric here on chorus 2, or do you always want to keep it the same?
I never thought about it. I don't think I knew enough to have different lyrics on the chorus from one chorus to the other. I'm trying to think. No, I guess I had done it a couple times.
Was Richard Andrews more of an engineer, someone that recorded you, or did he produce?
No, Richard was very good with offering opinion and stuff. And the more we got to know him, the more forthcoming he would be with that stuff. Yeah, Richard, so funny. Today as an engineer, I can think of like probably literally 40% of my basic work habits. They were learned from Richard.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And that was so early on in your career. You would have thought you would have learned that maybe a little later when you were working with the Andy Wallaces of the world.
No, Richard taught us so much about And I mean like workflow stuff, how to be organized, how to just approach workflow, how to have systems, how to keep the recording session from just being chaos, like those kinds of workflow things, how to label things, what to call things, guitar 1 DI, guitar 1 amp, guitar 2, guitar lead, like little things just to keep things straight.
I don't think anybody's ever talked about that on the show. That's such a great point. A producer being organized and having that workflow.
Well, the thing about the term record producer, and I'm kind of lifting some general text from Steve Albini here, but in so many words, he once said, the only prerequisite for becoming a record producer is to have the audacity to call yourself one. Okay, now with an engineer, though, that's not the case. You can't just sit someone in front of a mixing board that doesn't actually know what they're doing, because it won't happen.
Right.
Richard was real good with both things.
That's awesome. Well, we get to the bridge right out of chorus 2. It's just a classic Descendents bridge. It's still in the same world, but it takes you somewhere else, if that makes any sense.
Where's the love I was looking for? It's out the door. I'm afraid to see you anymore. Throw it back on the floor. 'Cause those sheets are dirty.
Where's the love I was looking for? It's out the door. I'm afraid to see you anymore. So it's back on the floor, 'cause those sheets are dirty.
Yeah, okay, so the bridge wasn't part of the premonition business. I wrote the bridge, I sat down with the guitar and said, well, I need a bridge. Okay. So
right.
I wrote the bridge. Yeah. So that's I thought that might be an interesting thing for anybody who cares about that sort of stuff.
Did you think the song needed a bridge?
Well, I mean, or it felt like it needed to go somewhere. I don't mean like it needs a bridge, like I'm working in the Brill building and telling the songwriter to rewrite the song. I just mean it felt like it needed a refrain. It needed to go somewhere that it hadn't been. That's what a bridge is, And then I don't know. The more you're throwing these lyrics back at me, the more I feel like I was pitting my living like a sardine in front of my kick drum in a sleeping bag. I was pitting that against a relationship with someone. But really, it's more complicated than that. It's almost like, because that means it could have just been anyone, as long as I could go somewhere and have a place to sleep, and she would buy me dinner or something or whatever. And plus she had a shower. We didn't have a shower at the practice room. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. When I explain to people how we lived back then, they think I'm making it up. So I don't know. It got better over the years. Like at a certain point, we for a little while we rented this apartment. We rented it for like 3 months, but then we realized that we were the only white people in the apartment, and the cholos didn't want us there, and they beat up Bug really badly one day. So we just moved out. They didn't want us there. They should have known. I speak fluent Spanish. I'm one of them. I am one of them. I love it. But they didn't want us, so we moved back out. And then for a while, we had 2 little kind of these little office spaces that we would make. We had 2 of them, one where we kind of lived and had an office, and then one that was a practice room. But I'm saying the total square footage of all that wasn't even the size of a large living room.
Right.
But when we had that second office, it did have warm water, and it did have a shower.
And at that point, that's complete luxury, because you guys you were sleeping on floors on the road and coming home and sleeping on floors. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. Or like we built bunk beds just out of plywood. We just built bunk beds in them. So so no one was actually on the floor. We did that pretty early on. Like we started doing that around 85. But it's the same idea. And then you're obviously there's no privacy there. I don't care. I wouldn't trade any of that. I wouldn't trade 1 second of any of that. It was great. It was the best times of my life.
Absolutely. I can echo that sentiment for myself. Well, I love the first line. Where's the love I was looking for? We get double time on the snare, and the stereo guitars and the bass are just locked there. On It's Out the Door, we get that surf beat, just kind of pop.
The best way to use the surf beat is as a refrain, not as the main beat of a song, but the way I do is I refrain to it for 2 bars or 4 bars, and then I get rid of it. Because that's when the last when the Last would use it that way, that was when it was really impactful. Like I hear a lot of bands that are, kind of come up, maybe influenced by us, and the guy will play the surf beat like kind of for the whole song or whatever. And I feel like the surf beat loses its effect after like 4 bars or so.
I agree, and you always kind of did it back and forth. On I'm Afraid to See You Anymore, we go back to that double time on the snare, so it's back on the floor is the surf beat. And on the last line, and Bill, my band's tried to do it, other bands, you do 16 snare hits consecutively, super fast on the last line here, okay, before we go into the musical bridge and guitar solo. And that that build-up you do, there's a certain feel that you have on that. I've heard other drummers try to do it, and it's so simple on paper, but the way that you execute it, it's awesome. It's such a great build-up.
There were bands and drummers that had big impacts on us. Where do I start? Robo from Black Flag, Don Bowles from the Germs, DJ Bonebreak from X. I don't know the name of the Buzzcocks drummer. Or then you had like The Fall and Gang of Four and the B-52s and Devo, and a lot of those bands, there were this like excessive staccato elements coming in, and I kind of like that.
Yes,
I kind of like that. And then also the Alley Cats with the eighth note. I really took to that, and Tony loved that too, and he was always really trying to bring in that Alley Cats influence into the band, and I think it's cool that it has stayed in the band all these years. And I know there's like 3 bands called the Alley Cats, but I'm talking about the one, like if you look at old LA show flyers, you'll see the Alley Cats. You'll see them headlining over the Go-Go's, headlining over X, headlining over Descendents, over Black Flag or whatever. They were like the kings of the LA punk scene for like 1 year or something.
Too much junk, too much junk. Too much junk, too much junk. Too much junk.
But they were a big influence on us.
Coming out of this lyrical bridge, Bill, before the guitar solo, there's 1 beat of silence.
Well, it's 2 beats.
2 beats, right. 2 beats of silence, followed by an 8-bar reintro. How did that happen? Was it calculated? We want the silence here, because you could have just went straight into the reintro.
No, it's natural. I mean, that's natural.
Natural for you.
It's natural to do. It's natural to do like a little 2-beat pause, right?
It's definitely you guys.
What do they call it? Done for dramatic effect.
I we'll go with that.
It's so funny. Talking about music is like talking about music is like skiing about cycling.
It's an interesting analogy.
But do you know what I mean? It's like if you could talk about it, you wouldn't have to play it, but you can't really talk about it. But
you're sitting here telling me that part's simple. It's something everybody does, and I'm going, well, not really. That's a little Descendents sounding there to me. But after that silence, it's followed by an 8-bar reintro. On bar 7, the guitar solo actually starts there. Stefan starts doing this run. On bar 8, we get a big tom buildup, and then a 12-bar guitar solo over the stereo guitars, bass, and drums. So the solo is an overdub. I gotta ask, those are tom overdubs you do in this section, correct?
I don't overdub my drums. I never even punched in a drum until I was an old man. All my drums are live takes, front to back. No punching, no overdubs. Only now that I'm an old man, I use some of that technology just for convenience. No overdubs.
That's interesting, because again, I'd never thought of there being overdub in this song, and I noticed there's quite a bit of them, as we talked about. Enjoy and this record has them. Listening to just this section.
No drum overdubs.
No drum overdub. Okay, you fooled me. There sounds like one in there. I swear it sounded overdubbed, but it is not. Okay. I also noticed, Bill, I want to see if you could talk about this a little bit. The solo here seems, I'll use the word poppy, really restrained for Stefan. There's no atonal notes. It doesn't kind of drift off. It's pretty poppy for him. Was that discussed? Was the solo worked on in this song?
Yeah, it's oddly enough, when I wrote the song, that whole section was just going to be like the intro riff over again. You know, all the riffing, all the Steve Stevens stuff. But then when we listened to it, it was like, it needs a solo. See, but Stefan didn't have anything written. So him and Richard kind of riffed back and forth on that. Richard would hum something and they'd work it out. Yeah. Richard is kind of like, he's one of those people, he's like just an asset to any situation he's in. I always feel like, you know, Stephen McDonald, Little Steven from Red Cross? I guess he's not Little Steven, he's a grown-ass man. But I mean, you know, I met him, he was like 11. But you know, he just, no matter what band he joins, he's always just such an asset to it. Richard's that way, I think.
Well, coming out of the guitar solo, we get a third verse.
Woke up this morning, I'm going on the floor, thinking about those clean sheets and the way it was before. When I looked in the mirror, I saw your face and thought of the past. But now I know how dirty you are. Took my fist and smashed the glass.
Woke up this morning, alone on the floor, thinking about those clean sheets and the way it was before. When I looked in the mirror, I saw your face and thought of the past. But now I know how dirty you are. I took my fist and smashed the glass. And you're telling me that Daniel Snow, Bugface, had a hand in writing this third verse.
That's all Bug, yeah. I remember now, because this was when we had that apartment in Harbor City at the Cholo building. And I remember walking around going, I got this song finished, because we were going to record in like a week. All the other songs were done, and I'm like, I got this song finished, but I just need a third verse, you know, and I kind of, the lyrics were laying around on the kitchen table or whatever. I just need a third verse. And then I remember like the next morning, Bug came into like, let's see, where was I sleeping? I don't know. Well, he came into where I was, and he's told me he wrote a third verse for it. And I was like, oh, cool. Nice.
Yeah, rarely do you get a third verse from your roadie that's this sound, musically sound.
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure that it's natural, you know, communal living and all that communal, like a band. It's all, you know, it's camaraderie.
Well, the other thing I noticed, the guitars in verse 3, they're pretty much, I mean, he's full downstroke here. There's a couple chugs here and there, but it's just full blast buzzing away. And that's probably why the overdubs here, those guitar overdubs, seem the quietest to me in verse 3, because the band is so raucous here. You even sound like you're a little bit more open on the hi-hat than the other verses here as well.
I can't speak to it. I know we weren't really moving much stuff around because there wasn't, you know, you're used to, in your day and age, there was automation and Total Recall and Pro Tools and all that. I mean, this was just dudes with their hands on the faders. So there wasn't, you tried to avoid having to move stuff around while you're mixing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, chorus 3 comes right off of verse 3. Same lyrics again. This one, however, is a double chorus. And the second time it comes through that double chorus, that guitar that is centered, the second time that it comes in, it stays in for the rest of the song. The last 3 lines are "those sheets are dirty." We get a harmony on each one of those. And then we get a 4-bar outro. It's reminiscent of the intro, only because of the placement of some of the stuff you're doing on the hi-hat, Bill. I'll say that jazzy part you're playing there. The stereo guitars and the bass is now playing.
What's the same riff? It's the same riff. It's not reminiscent. It is the intro riff.
Yeah, well, and then, but Carl his bass playing. He's playing some harmonics here at the end.
Oh, right. True. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that is just really, really cool. And the whole band just ends together here. And I got to ask you, I haven't done this until recently. Within the last 5-6 years of my career, I'll look out and I'll be playing some festival somewhere. And there'll be all these fists in the air. There'll be like 2 or 3 circle pits going on and just the energy's in the air. And I just have a little bit of a chuckle to myself at the fact that they're going crazy for a song I wrote when I was 20 years old. Do you ever look out, like Clean Sheets in particular, and you just see everybody singing the song and just say to yourself, I never could have dreamed this being this way?
I mean, that's pretty much every time we play a show. I didn't have many friends when I was young and stuff. So just the idea that anything I could have my hands on would be at all liked by other people, that just seems, like an unlikely result, but I guess it happened. That's cool.
Well, Bill, once again, the pleasure's been all mine. Is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners with? What you have coming up? Descendents, all the studio, Flag. What's happening in your life?
I hope I addressed the song well enough, but as I said, it was sort of hard to put myself back in that frame of mind. But I guess they say that if the art you did in the past doesn't kind of embarrass you a little or make you question it, then it means that you're not growing and progressing. So I'll take that as a win.
Yeah. And
let's see what's next. Well, we're gearing up for 50 or 60 Descendents shows this year around some of the usual haunts, the U.S., Canada, Australia, possibly Japan, Europe, the usual. We'll probably see you guys around, I imagine.
I think we will. Absolutely.
We usually end up on a festival or two together each year, whether we need it or not, right?
That's the hope.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's about it.
Okay, good, because I got to pee.
Another day goes by. We can't live like this anymore. Can't live without love. Another year goes by. We can't live like this anymore. Can't live without love.
I hope you all enjoyed Bill Stevenson's second appearance on Chris DeMakes a Podcast. I know I did, and I cannot wait to talk to Chris about it in the rap segment that's coming right up after a few words from our sponsors.
What's up, everybody? I am Finn McKenty, host of the Punk Rock MBA podcast, part of the Sound Talent Media podcast network. My podcast is all about doing what you love for a living, and every week I sit down and talk to people who have done exactly that. For example, musicians like Tommy from Between the Buried and Me, Matt from Periphery, Lil Lotus and Shinigami, among many others, photographers, artists, designers, YouTubers like Glenn Fricker and Sarah Dici, and I unpack exactly how they got to where they are today with the goal of helping you do the same. So if that sounds cool, you can listen and subscribe at soundtalentmedia.com, and I'll see you there.
As we near the end of the show, here's a band you might not know.
Welcome to this week's Band You Might Not Know. If you'd like your band to be considered for Chris DeMakes a Podcast, all you have to do is email your best song via MP3 only and a short bio to bandyoumighttnotknow@gmail.com. This week's featured artist is Danny Carney, originally from Massachusetts, currently residing in Los Angeles. Danny made his mark as the frontman for Epitaph Records' Roll the Tanks, releasing one acclaimed album. This project is called Danny Carney Chainsaw Symphony. And here's a snippet of their song, Hung Heathens.
Rap with Chris and Chris.
Well, Chris, I know people are going to be excited that Bill is back. Yes, you brought it up to him. His first appearance on Chris DeMakes a Podcast, I think, is the moment where you and I both said to each other, we got something special with this podcast. So I don't know if Bill even realizes how much that first time he was on meant to people.
Yeah, I tried to clue him in a little bit on the impact that his episode had. I even said to him, man, I had emails and texts ready to go. I wanted to send you from, fans and listeners that just appreciated the episode so much. But Bill's Bill. He doesn't like to sit on his accolades and rest on his laurels. But yeah, that episode was definitely a turning point for me.
Yeah, for sure. And then today, talking about clean sheets, it's amazing that with Bill, and this also happened on Milo's episode, that those guys look back on lyrics they wrote when they were younger and reflect on them being wiser, being older and wiser now. And they're like, not really sure about those lyrics now. I wouldn't have interpreted them. I would have thought that anyone could look at those lyrics if they are in a position where, someone did them wrong. And I'm talking whether you're a female listening to it, you're a male listening to it, anyone in the world listening to the song could relate to it. I didn't look at it I never interpreted this song as being misogynistic or anything like that. But I think it's cool that Bill can look back and say like, oh, this was the state of mind that I was in and I've grown as a person and, can still look back on the song and be able to critique himself. I do that about songs I wrote a long time ago for sure. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think it's good to have self-reflection. I asked him at the end, I said, what is it like to look out and still see people singing those, silly lyrics that you wrote when you weren't thinking at 20 years old? Well, what is that like? And his answer was, it's absolutely amazing. You kind of pinch yourself every time, and it just goes to show you that, just because maybe your perceptions of something you did artistically change doesn't mean that they change for the people listening.
Yeah, right. And everyone interprets a song in their own way. They assign their own meaning to it. Like I said, I never assigned any sort of real bad meaning to this song. It was just a song like, yeah, if you're feeling scorned in a relationship or something, it's kind of like it's like an outlet. Like the lyrics are an outlet that makes you feel better. That's the way the Descendents and all music that I like makes me feel. It makes me feel better when I'm feeling low,
Sure, and I've heard Bill talk about this before, where a song came to him in a dream, fully realized. He'd wake up, grab the guitar, there it is. As I said to Bill, that's never happened to me. I wish one time in my life it would. I have to work at it most of the time. I have to sit in the corner and I'll take a riff and decide what part's going to go next. Maybe start jotting down some lyrics. And it doesn't sound like that's his process at all. And that's intriguing to me.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that songs would come to Bill in a dream. He just seems like a guy who would have songs come to him in a dream. I will tell you this. I've had songs come to me in a dream, but like an idiot, I don't have I guess I have my phone. I guess I have my voice recorder, but I've woken up with like, oh, this is awesome. Some song I heard in my head in my dreams. And I forgot it within 20 seconds or something. So I think if there's ever a chance of that, you should have something ready to go right by your bed. I guess even getting the voice recorder on my phone would be too complex, unlocking my phone and getting in there. I think you need something where you could just hit record and go, because I don't know, maybe sometimes, maybe I've let some hit songs slip away in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I got to say, the people that have been in the Descendents, the players in this band, they've all been great in their own right. Frank Navetta, Tony Lombardo, Ray Cooper, but there's something to be said about Stefan and Carl on this record. It just, everything really came together for me as a Descendents on this album and this track in particular.
Yeah, you know what? Looking back, I think this might have been the first Descendents song I ever heard. I'm trying to think about it because, I was a 90s kid, but I think I heard this like on the college radio station or something at some point. Because I remember having it on a tape that I taped the radio. We've talked about that before. I taped college radio. I taped it, and that's how I heard a lot of bands that I liked. And I think this may have been the first Descendents song I ever heard.
I told Bill that too. I think this was the first one that I ever heard. And looking back at their catalog back then, I didn't realize it when I first started listening to them. They were just, another band I discovered, but, digging in and looking back at their history, I think that's one of the reasons people of all walks of life, they gravitate towards this band. They can sing about farts, they can sing about love, they can sing about heartache, and it somehow all works.
And as you said so many times, Chris, another part, a big part that gravitates me to them is they're all rippers. They are all so good at music that it is, on top of the heart behind the songs, there's also just stellar musicianship, which I love.
Yeah, and they're so good that they choose to do their recordings in one take now. They're basic tracks with no overdubs because they're like, we're good enough to do this. Let's do it. And I've always admired them for that as well.
It's punk rock, man. That's as punk as it gets.
Absolutely. Well, hey, everybody out there, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you haven't already, join our supporting cast over at chrisdemakes.com, where you get bonus episodes of the After Party each week for the price of a cup of coffee. chrisdemakes.com. We'd love to have you sign up over there. And please join the Chris DeMakes a Podcast Facebook group as well. We'd love to have you as a member in there. It's a lot of fun. Great discussions. Each week we get in there. We talk about previous episodes, the current episode, and everything in between. And don't forget to give me a follow on Instagram at LessThanChrisD. And give Chris Fafalius, my trusty producer, a follow on Instagram. I'm going to say that every week now. I'm not going to let you down ever again. And want to thank our repeat offender, Mr. Bill Stevenson, for sitting in with us. It was a lot of fun, and we'll see you next week.
Hey everybody, Satan here. I know what you're thinking. Jesus Christ, Satan has a podcast now too? No, that's not it. But I am here to tell you about a podcast, and it's one that's all about my favorite band, Punchline. Not the band you expected me to say, right? You probably figured I'd like Slayer, or maybe some backwards Beatles records or something. Those are okay. But you usually find me rocking out to fan-favorite Punchline albums like Action or Lion while I'm torturing dead people for all of eternity. Punchline's podcast is called A Band Called Punchline, and it's super entertaining to listen to this documentary-style look back at the 25 years of my favorite band. Honestly, I'm really feeling like I'm getting to know these guys, and their story is amazing. I'm so ready for them to get down here. I have so many questions. I gotta give them credit for catching on to my whole 37 thing, too. There's a reason why they're my favorite band, and if you listen to their podcast, they might become yours, too. A Band Called Punchline is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Check it out, and I'll see you all in hell.
Ready for a head-bangingly good time? Dive into the world of heavy metal with the Brutally Delicious podcast. Here, we don't just talk music. We welcome you into our heavy metal family. Join us for candid chats with legends and rising stars. We go beyond the typical interviews, exploring raw emotions and the life-altering impact of heavy metal. So whether you're a diehard metalhead or just curious, join our family and let the headbanging begin with the Brutally Delicious podcast.
Hey there, I am Johnny Christ from Avenged Sevenfold, and I've got a podcast called Drinks with Johnny you're going to want to check out. I sit down with a bunch of different people from all different walks of life, from professional wrestlers to actors, comedians, fighters, musicians, everything in between. I'm just looking to make some friends and have a good time doing it. So if that sounds like something you're into, go check out Drinks with Johnny, streaming everywhere now.